The following content is intended for mature audiences only. Grief. It is an emotion that is familiar to every single one of us. We have all felt the loss of someone through death. Brother Richard McFeely will join me to share the tragic incident which happened in his family twice. Brother Richard will share how he and his family dealt with these events. If you or someone you know is dealing with grief, join us for this conversation and know that you are not alone. It's Friar Time. Let's start talking. Thank you, Richard, for being with us today.
You're welcome.
Tell us about this really tragic time in your life and your family's life.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the years that have gone past since then. I think my niece was 13. Two of one niece and one nephew were killed 6 years apart about. I think it was around that time. Around the same date, Valentine's Day. In fact, my niece, I believe, died on Valentine's Day.
How did that happen? What was it?
Well, the first one was my sister Mary and her husband John, their daughter Zan. She was Alexandra, but her brother couldn't say Alexandra when he was little, so Zan came out, and she's known as Zan in the family. They were going on a trip, vacation together. They were going to go to North Captiva Island, and at the airport they were picked up by somebody who was driving them to catch the boat to get them there. On the way, the driver did some maneuver that she made on the highway. Anyway, somebody hit them as a result. Van, I guess, flipped over, and my niece, as I understood, was right by a window, and maybe the side that hit the ground. And she was extremely, it was very obvious she was very, very not doing very well when it initially happened. And I'm sure my brother-in-law, being a doctor, when he saw her initially, I mean, must have probably had a sense that this was not good. And his son, who was a little kid, is asking, "Daddy, help it, help it." He's a doctor. I guess the kid thinks Daddy's going to solve all this.
Right.
And, he did everything he could at that point. They were waiting for ambulances and that stuff. But I think for him, he's the doctor, and his son's yelling this and asking for this kind of helper. Must have been a very difficult thing for him because there was nothing he could really do to help her. Anyway, they wound up in the hospital. She was in the hospital in Florida maybe 2 or 3 days, and just before Valentine's Day, they got to the point where they realized that she was brain dead. That's it. There was no hope for her really. So they decided they were going to remove all the tubing, and which they did, and donated all of her organs to people who needed them.
How old was Zane when she died?
She was 13, I believe. Yeah. Wow. And I'm saying 6 years later, I might be off on the date, but a few years later, my other sister, their son was coming home from work at night, going home to where he was living, and was in a very serious accident just by himself. Somehow wound up hitting a tree, and he was pronounced dead on the scene. So
this is like 6 years later.
Yeah, it's not terribly long. I'm saying 6, but
so 2 horrific tragedies.
Yeah, with 2
one family.
Yeah. So they have to deal with this too. He left a little boy. He had at that point he was probably maybe 2 or 3, the little boy. So he was left without a father. Of course, he had the background of the family. We're a large family, and everybody certainly was there for him and for Zan as well.
And how old was your nephew?
He was 32.
So how did this, I mean, these are 2 horrific tragedies.
Yeah.
The emotions.
Oh, the emotions.
And then the second accident must have brought up even more.
For both, yeah.
Really? How did the deal with it? How did you deal with it?
Well, you're shocked. You're grieving yourself because these are people you love. You love your sisters and you love their husbands. Just the whole family. You're just feeling terrible. How we handled it was that we were all there together. We all banded together. We were around them. Not that you have the answers. You don't have any answers for them. I was there. I was supportive. But I think at a time like that, when it happens, it's better not to say anything. Just give them your support, because sometimes we say stupid things like, "Oh, you have a little angel in heaven who's praying for us all now," which parents don't want to hear, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So you're there and you do what you might feel very inadequate, but at the same time, just your presence and your listening, being able to listen, let them vent whatever they have to vent, thinking of the good times about us, sharing those things, just all different ways that you're helping.
I know from my experience of it, people just don't know what to
They
say.
don't know what to say. It's right.
Yeah.
So in some sense, it's better than not to say anything.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I know that in some work that we've done with parents who have lost children, I remember giving a talk at one of these retreats, and I said, I have no idea what you've gone through. I don't have the feeling. I'm not a parent. I just don't know.
Right.
And losing a parent or a brother is not the same as losing a child.
Exactly.
And I remember people came up to me afterwards, these parents who had lost children, and said, thank you for saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Because when people come up to us and say, I understand, they don't understand. The only people who can understand are parents who have lost a child.
Yeah.
And I certainly respect that and understand that.
And I think I heard that at groups that we did,
Yeah.
talking about that. And I think it's true. Even I'm an uncle. Was as close as I could be to them, but at the same time, I'm not the mother or father.
Right, exactly.
So I can't imagine. I can, up to a point, imagine what it's like, I suppose, but I can't imagine from the point of being a parent what that horror of that is.
It's unnatural.
Oh,
the death of a child before the parent is really not
right.
natural. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you deal with this personally? I mean, what were the feelings? I mean, were you angry with God?
No. No, I wasn't angry with God, because I realized God had nothing to do with this.
Mm-hmm.
This happened. This is part of life. This is what we as human beings have to face at times in our lives. God doesn't will it. God doesn't want it. It's just there, and it's just life.
Did your family get angry with God?
Not that I picked up at all. Now, I suppose maybe my sisters might have done, questioning why this, but nothing extreme.
So tell us about the two families and how this worked out.
Well, with the two families, the one sister, I said, her husband, their son was the one that died, and that sister, none of the one, as I said, they didn't want to go to groups, but they both seem to have gone through the experience, and from what I could tell, has strengthened their marriages. What I can say is that it has bonded the family, their family, as well as the larger family, even closer together. And we're very close as it was, but even closer. We had a lot of kids that we had to deal with, too, that were dealing with this. Her cousins that were her age, all that kind of stuff. I think it was done sensitively enough that I think they took on some of the healing just from watching the adults in some ways,
So as an uncle then?
Well, I think probably one of the ways that we deal as a family, and this would include being as an uncle, always, any of the deceased in the family, there's never a time that we don't meet as a group where we're celebrating, especially when we're celebrating. Like George, going to Lake George,
Right.
We'll bring things. We'll bring pictures, or that favorite hat of my father's, or whatever it might be. That even includes my older brother and his partner who died. So they're there with us, and we're always willing to talk about it. We always celebrate them, and we always pray. They're included in our prayers for all the blessings we as a family have had, and that they're mentioned as a great blessing and that kind of stuff.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and what we have also done, we've like where we go to Lake George, we have had trees planted in, my father's name. We had a bench made with all their names on it. That's just very simple little bench by the lake.
Hmm.
Just has the name, memory of John and Monica and the kids.
So those are the kinds of things that bring the family together
Yeah, yeah,
in a very honest way
right.
to deal with the grief that could be from years
Yeah,
gone by, or still a fresh wound.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I would imagine with the parents of children, that's a fresh wound
Yeah.
forever
Mhm.
in a lot of ways. So they're part of the family. It's not like they've died and we don't remember them in any way. We do.
Right.
They're constantly thought of. The kids are constantly talking about especially their two fellow niece or nephew that died.
I know too, in talking to parents who have lost children, that one of the things that they feel is very alone because no one wants to talk about that. No one, if they see somebody in the grocery store or something, they would be avoided. People would go around them. They don't want to meet up with these grieving parents because they don't know what to say. And so rather than be there for them and just, like you said before, say nothing, just be there for them,
Yeah.
they avoid them. They're avoided. And I know some of the parents really feel a sting of really loneliness because they feel like they're just out there by themselves after they've gone through this horrific thing.
Yeah.
It's just so difficult for people to come to grips with that they just avoid instead of be present to them.
Yeah. And I think the presence in my family is that we're a large family. There's
Right.
a lot of brothers and sisters. We're always have been there for them.
Yeah.
Not necessarily solving their issues around the instance, what has happened. They still might be struggling with things, but at the same time, that closeness helps them. The remembering of them all the time, all these different things help them to
Yeah. I mean, it's an
heal in a
honesty.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an honesty, I think, that brings about a healing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because if you can't talk about it, then it's just kind of like inside you
Yeah. And
seething or
eating away at you.
eating away at you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's definitely that opportunity for anyone in the family who has felt the loss. Everybody's felt the loss, but if they needed to talk about it, they certainly could, and people would listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing, the ability to talk about it.
Right.
Grief is something that oftentimes people deal with in their own personal way.
Right.
And I don't think you can force somebody to grieve in a way that's not part of who they are, their personality. On the other side of the coin, I think it's very important to remember that one of the ways that grief is resolved is, and come to terms with, is an honesty about the feeling that's happening to the individual, to the parent, to the mother, to the father who have lost a child. They need to speak to someone about it. And I know sometimes they can't even talk to their spouse about it.
Yeah, well, that's why some marriages could break up.
Exactly.
So that's why I brought up their marriages seemed very happy.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming, even though they were different personalities in the way they dealt with it, they somehow dealt with it together.
Right.
That they were able to get through it all. Because often you hear of divorce.
Yeah, that's very true.
You hear that. It's a sad thing.
But you seem to have dealt with it well in your family and with yourself also.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you feel that loss. You're in pain, of course. You almost feel helpless as what to do. All that kind of stuff is there. But and I think for me, it's fate, too. I believe they're in a better place. I know that in the sense that they're with the Lord and they're for all eternity and happiness and all that. It's just, I believe all that stuff, and that helps you to know that in the future you're going to
see them
again. I guess being from a very Catholic family in that sense, none of us, I think everybody has that sense that in the end we're going to be together for the most part.
So I think, as you're saying, Richard, for you, faith is something that really helped a great deal.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I think for everyone has to find something that kind of stabilizes them and helps them move on.
Yeah.
Not from the grief and not from the person, but kind of like continue with their life.
Right.
Because the loss is something that's always there. The grief is something that's always there. As one writer I remember reading said that when someone we love dies, there's a little hole in our heart, and that God doesn't fill that hole in because it's kind of like the area that we remember this person.
Mhm.
It's the space in our heart that can never be filled by anyone else.
Right.
And that it's the memorial to that person that we've loved while they were with us. So thank you very much, Richard, for being here and sharing this story. There are other stories that we're going to be sharing, not just about something that happened to somebody else, but also about how that relates to ourselves and the grief that we feel in so many different ways when we lose a loved one in our lives. So thank you for being with us, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
If you or someone you know is seeking help with grief or mental health concerns, call the National Grief Hotline at 800-221-7437. It is a 24/7 hotline, open all the time. Or visit firstcandle.org.